that's how I ended up in Costa Rica. I was racing for about 7 years, and then through some contacts, I met the guy that I bought my business from that's in Costa Rica through paddleboarding. And I kind of had a trust in the idea that if I continued to follow what felt good, like one, I'm going to feel good. Like I'm going to wake up and feel good.
Yeah.
And that as long as I'm doing that, like things will work out.
Welcome to the Ignite You podcast.
Stories of transformation, initiation, depth, and duality.
With a sprinkle of sass.
At the cheers to start, so same time.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Thank you, guys.
Welcome to the Ignite You podcast, crew.
Welcome, Chase.
We got a special day today. We got Chase Kosterlitz in the house, dropping in to share some wisdom.
Little reference
You
there.
will learn very quickly that his nickname is Surfer Chase. So there will be a lot of surf lingo flowing around in this conversation. Nice. But it's an exciting day today. We've got our good friend, our brother, a fellow Nosarian in the house today, sharing about his journey. And Ryan and I really wanted to drop in with this man because you've had quite the evolution in your life. You've gone from athlete to dad to traveler to living in Costa Rica and building a very unconventional life. And we really wanted to highlight a lot of your journey and how you really kind of broke the mold and moved out of a more conventional way of being. So welcome to the show, brother.
Yeah. Thank you guys for having me. I'm excited to drop in. Yeah, not on you, though.
Yeah, you would never.
No.
You would never.
No, Chase doesn't do that.
That's a surf joke. That's a surf joke, if you didn't know.
Yes, which is Surfer Chase. We'll maybe get into why you got the name in the first place and where that came from. But yeah, it's cool to look at your life, because when we wanted people on this podcast, it's people that have ignited others, or people that live a life that is of that space, like that are in a place of stoke, as I would say you are, or ignition, like feeling lit up for life. And I think you can objectively look at the way you're living and be like, damn, how did you get to that kind of place? Like, how did you create this kind of freedom? How did you get here to where, you're obviously a father, but it seems like you have so much freedom to do what you want. You've cultivated this space and capacity to have a fucking awesome life, if I do say so myself. And it's amazing to see, and we're obviously going to get into that, but St. Pete is also a overlap between us. So those of you who don't know, St. Petersburg, Florida is where I am from, also where Chase originated in some form. Were you from there? No, you're from Georgia.
Spent a fair amount of time there. Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah.
But what brought you there initially was the career with basketball? Or like, bring us into that, actually. I'd be interested to hear that piece of the story. Like, how did you even get to St. Pete? For my Florida people out there, like, how did you start that journey?
Yeah, and that ties into, I guess, a bigger story. But yeah, I grew up outside of Atlanta all the way until the beginning of high school. And then my parents divorced. I moved down. My dad moved to St. Pete. So I was like 13, 14. Yeah. And so then I started my St. Pete, Florida man life.
There you go.
And yeah, I could jump around, but that's basically in a nutshell how I ended up there. But then this could be interesting, I think, and I hope I'm not jumping ahead, but I played basketball. Got a scholarship to play at Loyola, New Orleans. And that was kind of my goal. I grew up playing basketball, and I went to New Orleans, and this was 2005. 2005 is Katrina. So I put my stuff in the dorm, freshman orientation. 2 days later, they evacuated New Orleans. Katrina was coming. We evacuated, went to Baton Rouge with a friend, teammate. They canceled the semester after the storm came through, flooded the city. And I went back to St. Pete, where my dad was, and I enrolled at Eckerd College because they canceled the semester. And I loved it there. And then I never went back to New Orleans. Like I played basketball at Eckerd. The city, unfortunately, it was just terrible, and there was lots of unknowns. So I stayed in St. Pete, and that kind of changed the trajectory of a lot of things there.
Well, for those of you who don't know, Eckerd is a coastal college, so it's pretty amazing. I've only seen the campus actually from the water, like being on a boat out there and seeing the campus at Eckerd and being like, damn, that's beautiful. Like, I want to go to school there.
Yeah.
And so it's like a coastal college, and I know you are a coastal human, or at least have come to be. So that it makes sense why you'd be drawn to that place.
Yeah, they call it Camp Eckerd. Like, it was like summer camp. You're on the water. Yeah, it's a good spot.
Nice, man.
I love that, dude. And so how did your basketball career then evolve? Like, bring us into kind of the beginnings of the athletic Chase. Like, how did your journey in
Such
that
an
world
athlete,
start?
by the way.
He's
tall,
he is
handsome,
an athlete, very humble.
Humble and an athlete.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys. As two fellow athletes,
Yeah.
it means a lot.
Tall, handsome
coming
as well.
from you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, my dad played professionally in Europe, and so he exposed me to basketball at a young age. When I was maybe 4, and I loved it. And then, there's aspects of wanting to please your father, but I did love the sport. But it was awesome that he had this career, and I just had talk about igniting your life and motivation. I did have, I feel like a natural drive to just get better. Like I said, I think there was some undertones of trying to please my father.
Yeah,
for sure. I know there are. But I loved it. I was a gym rat. And and through middle school, it's just like kept me very focused, goal oriented. I didn't have, I was fortunate to have, a great upbringing, great parents, and that kind of definitely kept me on a track of like focus, not getting into drugs, girls too much. Not that there's anything wrong with getting into girls, but it was just like, I remember I had, girls in high school, like, hey, she's got a crush. And I'm just like,
You're focused.
Yeah.
You're in the zone.
yeah. So, and basketball was my life, and up through the scholarship, I played 2 years, and then I got into kiteboarding. My neighbors were taking kiteboarding lessons. I was like, that looks cool. And I was a bit burned out on basketball at that point. It wasn't fun anymore. Collegiate athletics can feel like a job, kind of took the joy away from it. And so I think just almost subconsciously, I was like, I want to find joy in this other place. And I got into kiting, and then that changed my trajectory towards like water sports and a similar kind of focus on getting better and having fun now doing it in the water.
Yeah, that's amazing. And that's such a cool redirect. I know for collegiate athletes, a lot of the time it can be really challenging for, losing that identity as that person and really running into a lot of trouble. Like, I know there's some stat, and I'm going to butcher it, but for junior A hockey athletes, there's this stat around like 80% of them fall victim to substance abuse if they don't make the NHL, because they're like, well, who am I, what am I doing? And so I wanted to highlight that, because the redirect is something that resonates a lot in my world, not from a productive place of sports, but more from the streets. But that redirective energy is so powerful in kind of supporting that evolution or that transition. So I think that's really cool that you naturally fell into that. Yeah.
Interesting. The theme that we're going to notice keeps coming up is like this drive to like compete, I would say. But from what I've seen with you, it can be from a conscious place, which often I think is one of the spiritual spaces. There's like this bad light that's put on competition. It's like, competition is bad. Don't compete. Like, don't do that. Don't go against anybody. But if you want to play or do anything at a high level, you got to compete. I know we were actually just talking about this the other night over some tacos. We were talking about how like to find the balance between like competing and going hard, and then like building the best version of yourself through kind of, forging and competition versus, just coming from love and being soft and finding that time. It's like this interesting balance, but to be at a high level, at a collegiate level, and then you went on to other water sports. Like, how do you feel like competition you were in relation to it? Like, did you have a negative connotation to it? Like, was there a dark side of competing for you, or were you always kind of pretty good about going into competition and it was kind of driving you? Like, what do you feel about that?
There was definitely a dark side,
Yeah.
and I'm still trying to unpack it. Like we talked
sometimes
a little bit about it. We've talked a bunch about it
Yeah.
before, and it is such an interesting line. And I'm sure people listening can relate of like, yeah, having that drive, but where's that drive coming from? Is it coming from a sense of, you know, my self-worth is tied to that, that if I don't succeed, if I don't, you know, get a college scholarship, XYZ, you name it, or it doesn't have to be athletics, can be with a job, a relationship, then I am less than,
not worthy.
Yeah, I'm not worthy of love. Like, again, going back to the father and your parental attachments, but yeah, very much my drive to basketball was, there was an innate, you know, desire to get better, and I love the sport, but underlying that, and that's what I've unpacked, you know, these last years and continue, is I need to be good in order to be worthy of love. And I think that's a common theme. And we were talking about like a lot of the top pro athletes in different sports, and I don't want to say all of them, but if you look at the stories, there's some shit there, you know, that they didn't have a father, or they did and he was a hard ass, you know, like I'm just thinking of Max Verstappen, who's a F1 champ the last 2 years. Like, his dad is, he does not seem like a nice person, you know, and he's got all this pressure from him. I think I told you guys this story, but his dad, he like lost a race and they were in the Italian countryside, and his dad dropped him off in the middle of the countryside and was like, figure it out, like, and as punishment. And they talked about it as if this was like, that's what forged him into this fierce competitor. And I think this is an important point because it gets celebrated. I know it was celebrated for me, of like, you know, by any means necessary, succeed, you know, compete. And in reality, yeah, okay, like, do you need that to become the best? Hopefully not. I don't think you do. There's a way to do it consciously, like we talked about, but yeah, I'm unpacking that. But there's definitely darkness. I wouldn't change a thing, but there's a lot of beauty in competition. Teaches you a lot of things. But I think, you know, the lesson, and for anyone listening, is like, love yourself at the same time. Like, not tie your self-worth to outcomes. Try to be process oriented, you know.
Yeah, so many codes in that. Like, it is rare to hear, like you started with, you had a nice upbringing, like your relationship with your parents are good, and you had a good household. It's rare to hear that when at all, but it's rare to hear that whenever you're thinking about an athlete. There usually is shadow. Yeah, like they're either running from something or they're trying to prove something. And so to hear that, you know, you had a piece of that. I think we all have a piece of wanting to be seen and feel worthy, of course, but to know like you had an upbringing that was serving you predominantly, but still being able to find that drive. And, you know, we see you show up in that off, and we're in the surf with you, and you're competitive as hell, but you like seem to have found this balance that's serving you and actually more inclusive in the competitiveness. Not like, I have to win to win. It's like, we're all winning. And so, and of course, I'm putting like a nice lens on it. We can talk more about that.
Well, like, you're being really polite real sweet. Now. But it's interesting too, because, you know, I would really attribute our development in surf to surfing with somebody like Chase. Yes. Because, and this is, I think, something that's very important to share with people, is that it's super important to surround yourself with people that have that drive, that do want to see your best, and that will not just hand you everything on a silver platter. Because, you know, I think between us three and between our friend group, there's a lot of healthy competition. Yeah. And it's not like, oh, you dropped in on me, you're not coming to Tasty Tuesday. You know what I mean? For those of you that don't know, Tasty Tuesdays are a Tuesday dinner party. Gets very tasty. Exclusive group of three.
Sometimes four.
Sometimes four. We've got a few other people. But there's not this, like, there's no resentment that's held around it. It's more like, oh, I got to get better because I want to, like, play, and I want to evolve, and I want to grow. And so there's such a code in that, where it's important to surround yourself, I think, with people that have that level of competition, whether, you know, some of it's still in shadow versus light is kind of irrelevant in that case, but it's an important aspect, I think, of transforming, of evolving, of igniting the soul. You got to be pushed by the people around you.
Yeah, and to see somebody in greatness, like you're obviously a great surfer, And so to like see you surf was always an inspiration. I know for Cam and I, we far surpassed you, of course, but you know, like in the past,
100%.
for sure. No, actually, like this whole journey of like surfing has like seen you as this person who's a great surfer and like driving towards that. And that's continuously like, I see you surf. We went last night for sunset, seeing you surf. I'm like, fuck, like I want that in a way of like, I'm so looking forward to being in that place, like because of your stoke around it too, and your excitement around it. And so, yeah, it does go back and forth between the shadow and the light. 'Cause it's like, fuck, I need to get that. I need to get that. You have to go into a little pain cave, right? But then you come out of the light when you get that ride, and you're like, oh, this is so beautiful. But sometimes you got to go in the little pain cave to grow.
Well,
So
I love how David Goggins talks about that. And Dave, speak of someone that has heightened levels of athletic prowess, but tons of trauma and darkness.
Damn.
Like he's riddled with it.
Yeah.
But he's got this really important saying, and it's, you know, that little voice inside your head that's telling you you're not doing shit. He's like, you got to turn that voice up. And yes, he's got shadow, and you don't want it to be self-deprecating or harming, but you do want that level of like, you can do better. You can push this limit. You can go a little further. You can surf a little bigger. You can climb a little higher.
Yeah.
You're getting complacent. And I think that's really important for people, especially in the spiritual community, because so many people are like, no, I'm just great where I am.
You're settling.
You know, and Jordan Peterson talks about this as well, where he's like, there's nothing worse you can say to a kid than you're perfect how you are.
Yeah.
He's like, that if they're nihilistic and depressed, is that perfect? Mm-hmm. So it's a very interesting, very controversial topic, but I think I personally benefit from your dedication to your level of ability, your commitment to constantly getting better. And so I just want to highlight that it's a powerful tool, even though rooted in light and dark.
Yeah, it's tricky, but and it deserves its own conversation. But yeah, as you're saying that, like again, just personally, I'm at this end of the spectrum because your listeners are, I said are because I have a podcast too, so I'm going to switch it off.
They're ours now.
For this episode.
Our listeners. Some people need to not settle. They need that kick in the ass for sure. I feel like where I'm at, I'm trying to be okay with
be appreciative.
Yes,
be
with complacency.
Interesting.
With my therapist says, what does she say? Like not being perfect, like being okay with imperfection. Because it's the light and the dark. It's beautiful to have that drive. It's given me great experiences, a lot of things beautiful in my life. I'm glad I have that. I'm glad it's not like super hard to like get motivated to do anything. But for me personally, the dark side of that is what I'm unpacking and working on now. Of like, hey, because what it can become is it's never enough.
Yeah, totally.
Like, and that's thinking these athletes. Kelly Slater, 11-time world champ. If you guys don't know, undisputed best surfer of all time. And I love his interviews. He's very open and eloquent. And he's got some demons. And this is he's like of any sport. Really, it's not even fair to call him like the Michael Jordan of surfing because 11 world championships. He actually went off the tour because it wasn't fun anymore because he was beating everyone so bad. So anyways, but like you hear him talk and it wasn't enough. Yeah. And so I have found that was the path. It's like it can never be enough. So
totally.
So that's
it's that dance, right? Finding that balance, because you want to turn the voice up, but then you also don't ever want that to never be enough. You want to be able. It's almost like you got to go. You ain't doing shit. Oh wow, I accomplished this now. Celebrate, acknowledge, be so excited in that moment, and then it's like, okay, I accomplished that. That's amazing. What do I want to create next? All right, let's go. Turn the voice back up. It's like that titration, that balance that we always talk about ebb and flow.
Yeah. And so you're definitely on a more rare end of the spectrum, I think, where you've like mastered something and okay, I need to just be okay with what's coming. So back into your story a little bit, I think it's important. for like more insight into this journey with Chase, because with Chase, I'm looking at you saying Chase. With your journey, so you went into kite surfing, but then you started going into stand-up paddleboarding and like racing and like at a high level with that as well. Can you like bring us into that journey and how you got competitive there and like what came through in that space?
Yeah. I think there is like an innate competitiveness inside of me, and so I was into kiting. It was fun competing with myself, getting better. But and then that led me into stand-up paddleboarding, and it was at the beginning of the sport really where we started racing. The racing became a thing.
When was this?
This was 2007, 2008,
okay.
I think, and and then I do enjoy that process of getting better at something, the challenge. It feels good to use my body, energetically. I feel like that's what I grew up. It's just, it feels innate, in there. And I got in at kind of the beginning of that sport, and it was very similar to my trajectory in basketball. It's just like, all right, there's racing, I'll go to a race, and I think I got like fourth in my first race, but this guy with this huge pot belly at the end of the race, it was in Miami, he just passed me, and I'm not making excuses, but he was on like a proper carbon fiber race board, and I was on like a cruiser touring board. So I later like realized that, but it still like motivated me, and so like
fuck that guy.
This dude with a pot belly is like, dude, I've been like training, and but it was like a similar thing of like, all right,
it's
like
a drive,
this drive, and that just led me down this path of like just setting a goal. Okay, here's the next race, go to that, do a little better, and I did that for 7 years. Wow. Professionally.
That's so cool.
And how many goals would you say you set a year for that? Like, how did that, was it like, I'm training for one race, I'm training for a race every month? Like, how did you stay that course? There
would be like micro goals, like, if you want to call them that, like training goals, you know, like this is my training program, and I wouldn't even need to necessarily write it out, but it's just like, I'm going to train 6 days a week, I have that in my head. And then, I would pick probably like 3 or 4 of the biggest races of the year. I would do about at least a race every month on average, not all year, but let's say anywhere between 12 and 18 races in a year.
Wow.
And, and I would pick like 3 or 4 that were the big ones that I wanted to peak for. And I mean, my goal was a lot of times in the beginning, it was like, all right, I want a podium, get in top 3. Then it became, and it would depend on the race. If it was the biggest race in the world, like I was realistic. I wasn't the best. It's maybe a small window that was one of the best, but it was also the sport wasn't that big. As it became saturated, it became very competitive. But and then trying to place top 10 at the biggest race in the world. First time I went to Europe was probably like the highlight of my career, but it was this race in Germany. I had a German manufacturer that was my sponsor, and it was the biggest race in Europe. And there was this guy, Eric Terrien, French dude, who had never lost in Europe, for 3 years of paddle racing. It's like, I want to win that race, and I won it. And it was like the best feeling. Just my sponsors were there. He had never lost in Europe, so that was like definitely a goal. And it was always, and again, it's that balance of like, I don't think I celebrated it enough, like to go back to what you said. I celebrated it for sure. Like that one, I definitely celebrated. I took it in. And my ex-wife Sarah and I were traveling. We really enjoyed that trip, but then it was like on to the next one. So it's interesting, as you said, like celebrate it and then go to the next goal.
Interesting. And I think that's you captured beautifully such an important part of human evolution, where it's like you really have to have those pillars. I think a lot of people go, I want to do these things and create this life and become this person. But it's like, no, like what's your version of that monthly race? What's your version of that training program? What's your version of that, like those 3 or 4 major things that you're working towards every year? And ultimately, how are you going to celebrate those accomplishments and really, really focus on that? Because you were a professional athlete, right? And I think it's important, for my journey, I learned so much about growing myself by watching the pros, like watching professionals, like people that have mastered something. There's a formula. It's not like they're just really good at something and they found themselves in it. It's like they were really good at something and they followed a formula. And so, you know, I think it's really important for a lot of people who are listening, even if athletics isn't your thing, it's important to think about, like, whether it's business, whether it's breath work, whether it's meditation, whether it's yoga, whether it's whatever you want to become a professional at, like, what's your version of that? Because that's a formula right there. It really, truly is. And you got to have it for everything.
Yeah. I'm curious through that time and, like, you know, through basketball, maybe it's a bit different. Maybe it evolved because maybe your dad wasn't as involved in your mind. Like, what kept the fire going? What kept you excited? What kept you moving through that? Did you have a vision of, like, I'm going to move to Costa Rica one day, so, like, I know that vision, so I'm moving towards it? Or was it kind of like day by day? I'm just moving through this. I get this, you know, next competition. Like, how did you look at motivation during that time?
Yeah, I didn't really have, like, a vision board, you know? Like, it wasn't, and Kim and I were talking about this last night, actually, like, and I was fortunate to have parents that did always tell me, like, do what you love. You know, they traveled in Europe when just before I was born. My dad played professionally there. My mom was the head coach for the Swiss synchronized swimming team. Like, they lived a really cool, adventurous life. So that was instilled in me. Yeah. And my motivation was to do what felt good. Like, that sounds kind of simple, but to really tap into, like, it felt good to play basketball. I really loved playing basketball. So I didn't think about, like, what am I going to do for a job, like a career? You know, this is when I'm 15, 16. I did think, you know, I was like, I wanted to play professionally in Europe. I wasn't super tied to that, but I was like, that'd be cool. That's realistic. I could play in Europe, travel, and then see, kind of having some trust, like that things will work out as long as I stay true to what ignites me, right? Our podcast, to what ignites me, you know, like so feeling that, really being tapped into that, and I feel like that was innate too. Like, if something felt good to me, it's like, I just want to do that, you know, like that was just kind of there, I think, since childhood. And my parents encouraged me to stick to that. It wasn't like, you know, because society can tell you, get a job, white picket fence, you know, the whole American dream, and get on that track, you know, making money, you got to have a career. And my parents definitely were like, you don't have to do that, you know, travel, see the world. And I felt there was like, and I'm super fortunate to have parents that did that, and that if things didn't work out, like, I had a place to put my head at night, you know, like I wasn't going to be homeless. And so kind of trusted in the idea that if I follow what feels good, like I didn't even have to think too much in the future. So going to like Costa Rica, like it was, I want to play basketball in Europe. And then that changed, and that was actually hard to kind of let that go. But in a sense, I filled that with kiteboarding. Again, okay, that doesn't feel good. And it took a couple years to kind of work up the courage to quit basketball, essentially. And there's stuff tied in with my dad there, but my identity. But I did that, and then I was able to fill that passion with kiting, and again, follow that. I was like, maybe I'll work as a kite instructor, you know, and travel and do that. And then that led to paddleboarding. That wasn't a career. Like, I made money, but I couldn't support a family doing that. And that's maybe to wrap this in. That's how I ended up in Costa Rica. I was racing for about 7 years, and then through some contacts, I met the guy that I bought my business from that's in Costa Rica through paddleboarding. And I kind of had a trust in the idea that if I continued to follow what felt good, like, one, I'm going to feel good. Like, I'm going to wake up and feel good. Yeah. And that as long as I'm doing that, like, things will work out, if that makes sense.
Well, it does. And what we talk about often is follow the frequency. And that's something we preach here. But it's very rare that gets instilled as a kid. Yeah. I know I didn't have that. I know Cam didn't have that. It's very rare that people get instilled that lesson by their parents, and like,
That's amazing.
what feels good, you should follow. Like, you know, you hear the thing of like, you can do anything, but then when it gets real, it's like, but also, you know, get a job and here, and, you know, go to college and do like the specific thing. And to not like to be told to follow what feels good at a young age is so beautiful. And, you know, talking about instilling lessons, you mentioned, you know, you have a kid, Stella, who we love very much. Where did she come in on this journey? Like, this was in St. Pete? This was before you started going to Costa Rica? Or like, when did she pop out?
Yeah. so Sarah and I, Stella's mom, my ex-wife, I got to think of a better name. I think I don't like ex-wife. I love Sarah to death. We have a great relationship, co-parenting. We went to South Africa on our honeymoon, and Stella was conceived in Stellenbosch, South Africa.
No.
It's not where she got the name, but it kind of worked out.
That's cool. I didn't know that. That's awesome.
But she was born in San Diego, and when she was 2, we moved to Costa Rica.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. That's impressive. Like the way that you navigate parenting, I think better than anyone that I've seen, I would say, like to still continue to follow your own frequency, but parent really well. I was saying this to Cam. It's like the best example that I've seen. You actually embody that.
Yeah.
Like, and this may just be what we see now. You know, Stella's 7 now. And so it's like, you know, this is 7 years in, 6 years in, maybe when we met. But how did you start parenting but still continue to follow your frequency? Or did that take a back burner? And like, how did you start coming into parenting and still continue to do what you love? Because I know people will tend to put things aside and, you know, prioritize their kid, but then that means, oh, what I can do now, it doesn't matter anymore. I need to stop that. And it's all about the kid. And that can be beautiful, but that can also take... Yeah, so I'm interested in your perspective on this experience.
Yeah. It's a tricky balance.
Yeah.
I mean, I haven't done it perfect, and I'm still always navigating that. But I think it just goes back to... It kind of feels, honestly, like a little selfish. Like, I love what I do. I love surfing. And I've been fortunate to set my life up that I have time to do that. You know, time is a you know, invaluable resource here. It's easy to say like follow your passion, but you're working 9 to 5 every day. It's like that's it can be done, you know. But I'm just saying, for me, it was always like I still want to make, you know, my passion a priority and raise this human and try to figure that out. But if I'm following my passion, that's going to be the best thing for her, right? And she's going to pick up on that. And she hates surfing. She hates the water. I'd love to share that with her, and that's and it's beautiful that she doesn't, you know?
Yeah.
So it's not even in that sense of bringing her in, but I'm a better parent when I'm, you know, exercising, when I'm feeling fulfilled, you know, hanging out with my friends. And it's awesome that I get to bring her in with two new uncles.
She's the 4th person that comes to Tasty Tuesday, by the way.
A lot of times. Yeah. So I think it goes back to, as long as if I'm taking care of myself, then I'll be able to show up as the best father. And it's hard. Being a parent's hard. Like, and it kind of goes back to that inner voice of like never good enough. I found like I can apply that to parenting. Like, I'm hard on myself. Yeah. It's like I want to show up for Stella. Like, there would be times, especially when she was little, I've kind of worked through it, but that I would feel super guilty. Like, if I went to surf and I wasn't hanging out with her, especially in the beginning. And that's changed, and I've allowed time to be like, hey, I'm going to show up better as a dad if I do this. And then also force me to try to be more present with her when I am with her. You know, following my passion, time is limited, but then how am I spending that time? Am I present with her?
Yeah, that's invaluable. It's amazing how often we think with any relationship, like more time spent with them means better. Yeah. And you run a relationship podcast, so you know this. Actually, maybe you could speak to this, but there's quality time, like you're saying. Yeah. It's what it means when you spend that time. So it's not just time spent. It's like, how do I feel when I'm spending time with you? Do I put everything onto you that you need to be everything to me, or I need to be everything to you, even as a parent? I imagine that's difficult. I don't know that experience. but any relationship, right? It seems like we think we have to spend all this time, but really it's like, but if I prioritize me and I feel good when I see you, oh my God, that's going to feel so much better. Like I imagine if my father did that, or if my parents, really showed up for that space. And with partners, with friends, it's the same thing. It's like, I want to see you in all areas. I want to see you in all emotions, but I don't want you to feel like you have to spend time. Like I want you to feel like you're showing up for you, which is like, that's invaluable. And like how gifted that is too. Because I think about kids and how they experience their parents, and like if their parent feels bad, they'll like kind of put it on themselves sometimes. It's like, what did I do to make them feel? And I know I thought that. What did I do to make my dad mad or make my mom mad or whatever? But if your state is pretty neutral because you went and shredded in the morning and then you pick her up, I know you're picking her up from school after this, you're going to be in a great state because of the podcast. But being in that aligned place and then showing up for your kid, your person, whoever it is, I think is so valuable. It's powerful.
I think that's such a good code that I really want to reiterate here. And that's that, so many people come into our world and they ask like, what's the next step? Like, how do I bring something to life? How do I, launch my new business? How do I take my business to the next level? How do I move to Costa Rica? How do I become a practitioner? How do I become whatever that is? There's always this desire for that next evolution. And we get so cerebral with it in thinking that it has to be a sequence of steps, or it has to be, some formula, some method. And yes, there are formulas, but the most important thing is that you start taking action towards things that excite you and light you up. Yeah. And you're a prime example of someone that prioritizes self and then shares that love and that magic with your daughter. Because look at where she's growing up. Yeah. Like she's running around on the beach. She's like, oh, my dad's surfing. I'm running around on the beach, like playing in the sand with my friends. Like, okay, like that's amazing, right? But that's a byproduct of you following that excitement, of you following what lights you up, not going, well, to be a good dad, I got to do X, Y, Z, and I got to follow A, B, C and all these systems. It's like, no, I'm going to light myself up, and then I'm going to share that energy and those ripples with the people that I care about. And it's not cerebral. It's action based, excitement based. It's that internal compass, and I really want everyone listening to take that in and really sit in that, because you didn't have like a ton of money and someone just was like, hey, go live in Costa Rica with your family and build a beautiful life. It's like, I know your story. Like, you went through the process and you put in the work and you did all the things, but you did it from a place of trust, from a place of excitement, from a place of knowing, and from a place of wanting to share that love and that beauty with the people that you cared about. That's it. And it all worked out, and that from an Ignite perspective is everything. Everything. Follow the frequency. Like Ryan said, follow that excitement. It works out when you stay in that.
Yeah. I know there's a lot of beautiful things about living in a place like Costa Rica, raising a family here and having that experience. But for people listening, I know we even have a few listeners in particular that have kids and like, I want to move to Costa Rica. I want to do like things like this, for instance. And Cam and I have done an episode on like the highlights and then the shit about living in a place like this. But as a parent, as raising a child in a place like this, what are some of the shadows? What are some of like the difficult things about being in a place like Nosara, Costa Rica, and like raising a human? What's that like?
Yeah, I mean, it's not the easiest place to live. I would say like very kind of practical things.
Yeah.
Shoes. Shoes. No, to be fair,
actually,
it is
seriously, you can't get Birkenstocks here.
You're not gonna get Amazon coming to your door, but like very practical things like healthcare, like emergency services. We had a scare a year ago that Stella had bad pneumonia and everything worked out, but like it's an hour and a half to the closest hospital. So
it's scary here.
Yeah, and you have to consider that personally, but. We probably don't think a lot about what if we have a heart attack. The hospital's an hour and a half away. But when you have a kid, so yeah. But and there's ways around that, having protocols. But yeah, I mean that's an element of being here. But you know, and then like there's not a ton to do outside. Like you're not going to take your kid to the movies.
You're not going to Busch Gardens.
Yeah, Busch Gardens, stuff like that. But there's pros and cons to everything.
Yeah, oh yeah. Disney World.
Yeah,
this is called Disney World.
I don't have a man bun, so I don't get in on the inside jokes, you know?
You have to be a Florida man.
Men.
Florida
we're
men.
men.
Yeah, Florida boys. Boys.
Yeah, so...
Boys to men. Sorry, we cut your flow.
Yeah.
That happens. That happens in what we do.
Yeah, there it is.
Yeah.
But yeah, I couldn't say. I think it's beautiful, and I feel very fortunate to be here and for to be able to raise Stella here. Yeah, there's so many beautiful things, and I wanted to go back to what you were saying about like just action and moving to, you know, to Costa Rica, or whatever it is that you want to do. You and I talked about it. I think it would be valuable for the people to hear, but whether it's, you know, it doesn't have to be moving to Costa Rica. It'd be like, I want to go to the gym tomorrow morning, you know, starting small, but the fear setting, you know, and if you're talking about, I think that's especially valuable in bigger things, but I just thought about that for my own experience of coming to Costa Rica and other decisions. But it's like, what's the worst case scenario, and putting that out there. And then, you know, again, I feel super fortunate that I have parents that, because we were super broke. Like the second and third year here, there was a pandemic. I have a tourism-based business. There was no money coming in. And the worst thing that would happen is we would have to move back, and I'd have to move in with my mom or dad or Sarah's parents. But like, that was the worst. And so, but when you lay it out and when you write it down, or even just think about it, to me, it kind of took a lot of the power away from it, from the worst case scenario, from the fear of taking action, you know, because people be like, oh, how did you move to Costa Rica? Like, I have friends from high school, college. It's like, what do you mean? Like, got on a plane. Like, but I had in the back of my mind, like, okay, this is what I want to do. I want to build a business, this and that. And which is super valuable. Worst case scenario, it doesn't work. And I'm living at home and rebuilding, you know, I'll get a job at a grocery store if I have to. And I'll figure it out.
Yeah. And I love that. That's a tool that I've started using. That's a tool that I've shared with clients after our conversation. It's such a powerful piece of the puzzle, because when you write it down, you see it, you're like, I could figure this out. Yeah. And then you're like, okay, well, if I stay where I am now, nothing changes. And then if I think about that over the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years of my life, how does that make me feel? Oh God. Right? And then it's like, okay, or I could do this thing. Quite possibly it works out. If it doesn't, this is the outcome, but I'm pretty much probably back to something similar to what I'm already doing. So why the hell not?
Yeah, it's the same thing. Regret weighs so much heavier than failure.
Totally.
Like, regretting not trying it weighs so much heavier than 100%. Failing while doing it. But yeah, it's in Stoicism. That's actually a saying, and what they have there, it's like, start with the worst case scenario first.
Yeah.
Like, look at that. Oh yeah, it's actually not that bad. The mind is creating this whole storyline when in reality, it's practically not so bad. Yeah.
I love that. So, to wrap this thing up, you've shared some codes with us here, man, and this has been amazing. I'm curious, for people listening who really want to kind of ignite something inside of them, do you have any kind of closing words, any codes, any bit of wisdom that you just like to impart them with in that sense?
Make it really great.
Don't mess it up.
Don't mess it up. Yeah, I mean, we covered a lot. I think, to go back to the regrets real quick, like, I don't have any regrets because I feel super fortunate to, it's not like I made this. Like, I was taught it by my parents and then I was able to follow it. I didn't choose that. And to take action, and I'm thinking of The Lion Tracker's Guide to Life, I believe, by Boyd Vardy. I recommend that book. It's a great book. This guy's a lion tracker in South Africa and comes from a family of lion trackers, but it's a book about life with that lens. And he talks about sometimes you got to go down the wrong path when you're following a lion, when you're tracking a lion, to take you onto the right path, you know, and that's literally what they do. Like, they call it wrong path, I believe. And that's a part of, it's like also not having the fear to go down that path and then to come back to the path that you were on, to go to what you said. So yeah, it's not a concise thing that to leave our listeners with, or maybe it is, but yeah, like you're on this path, you're on this life path, and you might be visualizing it like, if I go down the wrong path, like, oh my God, like that's things are going to get messed up. But it's like, no, that's what you need to do to find the lion.
Yeah.
Right. This is what I didn't, this is Boyd's words, but you have to go down those wrong paths. No one is always choosing the right path and they just, oh, there's a lion. Like, I found it, perfect. And it never ends. Like, we're constantly trying to track a lion, you find it, and then you go try to find the next one. But you got to go down the wrong path sometimes and then go, okay, retrace your steps, get back on. The path is still going to be there. And then, but having the courage to do it again, you go down the wrong path. So I don't know, maybe that'll be a place to leave everyone with.
Potent.
Amazing.
Yeah, that's powerful.
Yeah,
We'll definitely put the link to that book below as well, because I still need to read that.
Yeah.
But yeah, amazing, man. Thank you.
And for everyone that wants to check your stuff out, because we didn't even really talk about it, but Chase and his former wife, Sarah, run a very successful, very powerful, very beautiful relationship podcast. So yeah, do you want to let us know about that so people can tune in?
Yeah. It's the Relationship Advice Podcast.
Nice.
Classic.
Sarah now produces, and I'm interviewing. I'm not giving the advice. I'm just interviewing therapists, counselors, and psychologists, and they can check it out at idopodcast.com and anywhere on iTunes if you go to Relationship Advice.
Cool. And we'll link
Spotify and all that good stuff. Yeah, we just passed 400 episodes.
Ooh, nice.
That's massive.
That's huge.
That's crazy. It's where I don't even know, like in the 30s maybe. I think we're in the 30s somewhere. So that's incredible.
It's a lot.
You've been doing this for years.
Yeah, I think we started it like 8 years ago.
Incredible.
Took a little
You got
hiatus.
some codes in there.
Some
relational
serious
codes, people.
codes.
Check them out.
And the other one too, which is your biz here, is Blue Zone Sup, right?
Yep. It's stand-up paddle surf retreats, all-inclusive thing, bluezonesup.com. Yeah.
Beautiful.
SUP stands for Stand Up Paddleboarding, people.
Sup, dude.
Sup.
Sup, dude.
Yeah. Amazing.
Epic.
Dude, thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Appreciate you,
I think
bro.
you're doing awesome stuff. I love you guys. I appreciate your brotherhood, and yeah, thanks for having me.
Pleasure.
Thank you, dude. As always, crew,
Stay lit.